What is up, citizen detectives, antler queens, and secret boyfriends? Welcome to the Yellowjackets Buzz podcast. Today we have a special guest, Kevin Alves, Travis himself from Yellowjackets. Kevin, welcome to the show.
Thank you guys so much for having me. I'm super happy to be here.
This is awesome, man. You are killing it on the show. You have had an amazing season, and so much has happened with your character. What is this like, being in this moment with Yellowjackets just snowballing in popularity?
It's surreal, guys. It's been a cool ride. I always say this that whenever you make a show with a group of people, when you're making it, you're just enjoying the process and you're creating something, but you have no idea how anyone's going to receive it. You also just have no idea how the finished product's going to turn out because there's so many different filters that it's then going to go through and so many different steps in post production. So you never know how it's going to turn out. Sometimes you shoot something and you're like, this is amazing. And then you watch and you're like, "Eee." And then there's sometimes where you're shooting something, you're like, this is hard. I don't know what's going on. I don't know if it's going to turn out good. And then, then Yellow Jackets shows up. And yeah, it's so it's been surreal to see the response that the show's gotten, and to watch all my castmates' performances again, and and get to see the 2021 performances now. It's been cool because when I first joined the show, I was so excited to work with this entire cast, and then to get to be on a show with Melanie and Juliet and Tawny and Christina. It was just it's pretty surreal.
It really is like 2 shows in 1, and I would assume given the separation that, yeah, you really didn't know what that other half was gonna look like. I mean, you've had the scripts obviously, but, that must be a very interesting experience to, get to experience that other half live with everyone else.
Yeah, we at least got to see stuff in read-throughs, and it was really cool to watch everyone in read-throughs do their work as they're just reading it for, like, the second time maybe, coming off the page and just seeing everyone's instincts, and then getting to see that parallel as to actually what it turned out to look like at the end, has been super fun, and I've just been in awe. I've been watching everyone going like, "Wow, they are so good."
Yeah, we've been watching the popularity of the show grow. We started covering it probably before anybody else started, and just to see the popularity of the show just take off has just been such a fun experience. And seeing the following for you guys and everybody just seeing the performances, we've been so happy to be following since the beginning.
Thank you.
Absolutely, man. So let's start at the beginning, of your process with Yellowjackets. What was the experience for getting cast in the series?
So it was a kind of the normal situation where, my team shot me an email with, some sides that I did a self-tape for. The interesting part about this was that I had actually just finished shooting Lock and Key season 2. We are talking, like, couple days later. I actually think that I got the first audition for this when I was still in my last week of shooting Lock and Key. So, that was cool because, again, as an actor, you're always prepared for just, like, that time in between. Sometimes whether it's time off or just waiting to find the right project, and then Yellowjackets showed up, and I saw the script and I was like, I love the complexity of this character. And I love that I hate him in many ways. So there was like that ability to like, I love that I hated him. Like the way that he treated people, it was like, we need to show this and then show people being like, this isn't what you do. And that's what this show does constantly. And so I was really happy to get the first scripts, and I shot a tape to them, and then, it was less than a week later that it was all finalized and done. The offer came through, and then we got things sorted out in the next week or 2, and then less than 3 weeks later, I was on a plane, and we were shooting the show, and when I was heading over there to shoot the show.
So, were you involved in the original pilot, or were you cast once it was picked up to series?
So, actually, interesting story, I wasn't in the pilot originally, and, it's a really cool story that, Ashley, then talked to me about how this relationship of Nat and Travis was, cultivated as a separate storyline almost, and then Showtime really loved it, and that got put into the show, and it kinda became, part of this whole story and became a huge part of the story, and so I felt super lucky that this role got added, and so for the pilot, we just reshot a couple scenes, we added Travis in for those 2 little moments in the pilot, but yeah, I joined the cast and they had already shot the pilot, so was a fun experience to meet a bunch of people. It was super intimidating to meet a bunch of people
Yeah.
who had already worked together, but it was fun nonetheless, and they were so welcoming, so it was great.
I love that you brought up the fact that you didn't like certain things about Travis because me as a woman, I gotta tell you, I popped so many times for not educating Travis and changing his point of view on certain things. So I meant to ask you when you were reading that, did you think, God, why is this guy like this? And were you happy to see that he gets educated and he changes his ways throughout the season?
Yeah, so the way that it worked for me was when I first read the first couple scenes that I had to do for the audition, I had that same thought where I'm like, "I am happy that he's going to get put in his place time and time again, and that's great." But then once we got into the show itself, I really, it was important to me to make sure that I championed and justified every single decision Travis made. And so from that point on, I spent 5 months loving this character in many ways, being empathetic towards this character, finding the reasonings towards what he was, his uneducation in certain aspects, making sure that I took into consideration that 1996 is a different time period than now, and he's not going to know how to react in those situations. And even now, at the age of 17, 16, the reactions that people have when they're uneducated in those scenarios in terms of how you treat people. And so I spent a big chunk of time championing him as best I could. And then it all flipped again when the show came out and I got to watch it, and I watched it and screamed at myself, not well, not myself, but Travis, being like, "You just talk to people, care about people, be there, express yourself, like stop holding things in, and stop treating people so terribly." But at the same time, I think I applaud Ashley and Bart for writing this character because I believe that, you know, people who don't act accordingly in situations, there is reasons for that, and I think that we try really hard to make it clear that there are reasons for why he is the way that he is.
Yeah, and I believe that people can grow. They just need the right guidance and the right education. When you're uneducated, you just need to do some research and learn about things. In a finale that was so full of moments, I thought that moment between Travis and Nat just making up and him finally admitting his feelings to her, I gotta tell you, it was one of my favorite moments in an episode that had so many moments. So great job on that. I was just waiting for it. I'm like, can you just tell her, please?
Well, yeah.
It was awesome.
Yeah, it was frustrating to have him in episode 9, talk about it one way to someone else completely, and then, finally to have him, first of all, apologize because I think that's really important. I think, I don't think he apologizes in the entire series except for one time in episode 6 and then now in episode 10, and the one in episode 6 was a little bit like, "I'm sorry," and yet, like, I feel attacked all at the same time, so it was nice to have them see that moment, and man, did they just kill my heart with the song choice during that thing when it's the same
Yes.
song from episode 3, and it just gut-wrenching. I remember Sophie, T, she sent me a message being like, because she had seen the scene before, and she's like, "Oh, they just gutted me," and it's the
Yeah.
same thing with me.
Yeah, with Ultravox's Vienna. No, it's very well done and a
Mm.
very nice, I guess, almost forward bookend to what we saw in episode 3. So yeah, so I definitely want to talk about all that. So when you came in with episode 2, so you knew then when you were cast that Travis survives this, and you must be thinking 5 seasons. This is great. No, I'm like not in danger. Like I know I'm gonna make it through.
Yeah, well, I guess it comes down to I really wanted to take it just one step at a time
Yeah.
and focus on the story that we were trying to tell now. So it was, yeah, exciting in a way to just know that there is an older version of Travis that was going to exist and knowing that this storyline was going to have its time. It wasn't going to be rushed, that we were gonna have that time. I think that's something that, I'm really obsessed with reading, like, Reddit and Twitter and everything, as I think our entire cast is. Our group chat literally is just everyone sending tweets and and stuff from Reddit all the time. And so, I definitely sympathize with so many people being like, why are Nat and Travis taking so long to figure this thing out and get going?" And I'm like, I think that's just naturally how it would happen. I think they would have a push and a pull the entire way through, and I think that's how teenagers do. So, it was really nice in in that sense to know that Ashley and Bart had allowed that time for
Yeah.
us to figure it out, and so that was really great. But honestly, I was really just focused on trying to keep up with such an amazing cast.
Yeah. And you get to do like more and more heavy lifting as the series goes on, and we'll definitely talk about that, especially with episode 9, where I mean you were very central to that. But it's interesting on so I'm definitely one of those freeze framers of the Yellow Jackets Hive,
Yeah.
and eagle-eyed viewers will note that in the pilot episode on Coach Martinez's desk, his alternate family from the original cast, the Eric Stoltz to your Michael J. Fox, who played
Yep.
Travis before you. I
Yeah.
picked up that detail. And of course, the way the Reddit hive mind works is like, oh, Coach Martinez has a secret family. This is why Travis hates him so much.
No, yeah, if I believe, I'm not sure, someone told me that I think that originally in the pilot, there was, the 2 kids are also on the plane, if I'm not mistaken, and that
Yeah.
but they're younger.
Yeah. And
And so
Cody, I believe, is the Cody instead of Javi, I believe is the
yes.
other change. So that's really interesting. So let's jump right in and talk about working with Sophie Thatcher and the journey between Travis and Nat.
I feel so lucky to get to have done this with Sophie. I really believe that she is so incredibly talented and more importantly, really diligent and hardworking and detailed. And I think that that was really nice to get to go through this process with Sophie. Um, Noteworthy, I think, is that episode 4 was really important to us
Mhm.
because it was this, there was so much growth in the way they saw each other all in one episode from the beginning to the end. And, we were really lucky that Deepa Mehta was our director for that and really, really is an actor's director, cared about what we wanted to figure out, and we spent a lot of time just talking about it in between takes, and Deepa was really open with us about, "If we're here, I need this, and we need to get from here to here, and we need to set the big thing that the 3 of us talked about was this is a base that's gonna create the rest of the season. What happens here is important because we can't believe what's gonna happen later if they don't have this common understanding as to where they're both at in life, and that you have to feel that without them even really saying it, because I don't think neither one of them really admits that they really see each other in a different light, but they kind of give these little inklings as to how they feel. And so, yeah, Sophie's so detailed in her work, and it was just a pleasure. It felt like every time we had something to explore and figure out, and so professional as well. And I think especially when you're dealing with a romance on screen at some kind, um, it's really important to feel like you have someone that you can trust professionally. With Sophie, it was always that way. I felt like we could have a conversation about anything and never feel like we're taking anything personally. And I think that was really important. So, yeah, all in all, I feel super lucky to do this with her.
You have such amazing chemistry together. And that's the thing that really struck me. So as Issa pointed out earlier, I look at Travis and my first instinct. So I in 1996, I was 19, turning 20 years old. So I look at Travis and it's like, holy shit, I had gym class with this kid. Like, this is like somebody that I went to junior high with that, we were acquaintances, we weren't friends, sort of kept to himself. But yeah, there were layers there. There's like mystery, but this outer shell. And for your experience, so I blew Issa's mind before we got on the air. You are 30 years old playing I believe Travis is 17 turning 18, I want to
Yeah.
say.
Yeah.
And you have now the unique experience of viewing teenage boy masculinity from your own experience in the aughts to how it's viewed in the present day to how it was viewed in 1996. Can you talk a little bit about how you sort of adjust that prism for accuracy?
Yeah, I think, this reminds me of a funny story. I think everyone's first impressions of Travis when they saw him on screen, a lot of it, people were like, "W a emotionless guy, an
Mhm.
emotionless guy who just clearly doesn't care about anyone and can't show human emotion." And I was super happy when those were the comments coming out, even though it seemed negative, because that was exactly what was important to me was this guy is going to hold it to his chest, any sort of emotion he has, and you're barely ever going to see him give you a glimmer of it. And so that was important to me because I thought about when I was that age, and then I thought about the time period on top of that. And when I was that age, I already didn't want to give people any sort of anything that felt like someone could come back at me with. It was almost
Mhm.
like a protection, right? It's that protective, like, I don't want to give anyone something that then they're going to use against me. And so Travis, I think, has those walls built up. But on top of that, we're talking about the way that he creates those walls is different from mine, where in 1996, it would be, you know, misogynistic comments
Mhm.
come at you, attacking you rather than quiet. It's not just quiet, it's he retaliates. And so that was really important and the writing is what gave me that. And that's the thing, right? And I always try and say as an actor, it's just our job to justify and figure out why a writer put this in, why is this here, why is it important? And so that's kind of how I tried to build where how he created his walls now is I just read the script and went, where are they where do they see him? Where is he on this
Yeah.
spectrum of hiding himself? And and so I tried to draw from myself, but also from the writing, but also from the time period. And it was really just a balance because even as the episodes go, the writers allowed for Travis to have moments that changed the way that he was perceived and how much he gave people and how much he emoted. So, for instance, like, if we get all the way to the end of episode 10, there's the first scene where you see it if you pay attention for a moment right before Nat shows up. He's there looking at himself and you see the pain and the suffering
Mhm.
for it's like a glimmer, and the minute she walks in, he's tight again and he's back to holding himself together. And so it was stuff like that that I found really fun to explore when it came to his emotions. But definitely, I'm glad that, the negative qualities came out in the sense of like he does have toxic behavior that he throws out there quite often.
Dude, I cringed so much at some of it and felt like I needed to apologize to,
Yeah.
some women I dated in my teenage years watching these
Yeah.
scenes. Very relatable, and very real.
Yeah.
You
It,
talk about the different time period with 1996, right? Did you do research to figure out maybe the differences in how things were back then for teenagers compared to how they are now? How was your research going into your playing somebody at different age in a different time period,
Yeah, I think the most important part was to just, look into pop culture at that time and what
right?
movies and television were coming out at that time and what was being perceived as the right way to act at that time based on and mostly I did that based on movies, TV shows, and stuff that I'd already seen. And it's just remembering to, like, research and go like, "Okay, what was coming out in 1996, 1995?" And that was really important to me, and
So,
it
what's
was
your favorite 90s movie? I have to ask,
Oh, my favorite '90s movie. See, I loved all the '90s action, and I love '90s
right?
Disney kid stuff, so it was kinda like a mixture of the 2. So, like, the year that I was born, actually Terminator 2 came out, and it was one of the latest movies,
Classic.
and that was kind of like I believe the late '90s was the reign of Will Smith in the early 2000s, as
Oh,
I
yeah.
call it, and he went
Right.
I believe that Will Smith went in the late '90s, early 2000s, he went 7 movies in a row that were number 1 in the box office,
Mhm.
which
Yes.
is something just crazy and unheard of. So, all those films and, yeah, still one of my idols to this day in many ways.
Well, good to know.
And TV shows, like, I loved all the kids stuff, and again, I'm a Lion King fan, I'm a Disney fan.
Nice.
I could go to Disney, like, 20 times a year, I'd be fine with
Yeah, no, pre-pandemic, man. I mean, yeah, it's, well, I
Oh,
love
yeah.
Disney culture. Been watching, like, Defunct Land to get through the just not being able to go anywhere.
I was so lucky that right before the pandemic, I got to do the Rise of the Resistance,
Yes,
Star Wars
yeah,
ride right before, and
we did too.
it was the greatest experience. I think it's just one of the coolest rides ever made.
Wow,
Totally.
I feel totally left out in this conversation.
Yeah.
Whatever, both of you.
Well, I have to ask though with '90s movies because there is an interesting parallel. Are you much of a Kevin Smith fan? Have you watched much of his films?
A bit, yeah, Kevin Smith, I have a few friends who are huge Kevin Smith fans, so I've kinda watched quite a bit.
Because there's something very interesting about the way Travis reacts that almost says to me like he watched Clerks and took away a light comedic message, but unfortunately he's going to be in the woods when Chasing Amy comes out and is going to miss sort of the evolution of how you
Yeah,
deal with insecurity in relationships.
so true. That's such a great point, I love it, and yeah, and I think that was really important is to go like, what was cool? What was
Yeah.
cool to do at that time period? And Travis, what was cool to do was to treat people badly, as horrible as that sounds.
We know Jane and Liv made playlists. Did you do sort of a Travis character playlist or deep dive into the music?
No, I tried pretty hard to stay away from music when it comes to, like, when I'm actually physically acting. If I'm
Yeah.
watching and enjoying myself, yeah, but when it comes to acting, I really do like to sit in my silence because I
Hmm.
believe that thoughts are kind of really a part of my process. Like, what do you think about? Like, where does your head go when you have nothing else distracting you? So, and I think that that's always been really important to me when I'm acting is what are your thoughts when you don't have something being telling you as a thing? And so I always try and go from that angle, especially when we're like about to do a scene or something. You'll see me kind of take a minute, walk
Yeah.
for a second, just have that thought process. What is actually on your mind during this moment when no one's talking to you? And so before we start the scene. So that's kind of my thought process, but I have already looked into Liv's and Jane's playlist because 'cause they're so good.
They're great playlists.
Oh, so good.
I look at Travis and I'm just like, okay, he was rocking the first Korn album and listening to
Oh, yeah,
like Downward
Oh, yeah.
Spiral,
absolutely.
very into early Rage Against the Machine.
Everyone you would assume that when he's on the plane in the pilot, and
Yeah,
it's like, oh, he is just the most moody version that he could possibly get.
absolutely, man, absolutely. But that's awesome though, and it's just interesting to see that context. I mean, and I think for my generation, I think that's part of the reason why the show is resonating so much because there's the '90s tie-in, you have the nostalgia factor, and there's so much accuracy. I mean, in the fashion, the attitudes, the music. I mean, everything about it just feels just so real, and we don't see that in a lot of TV. I feel like nostalgia often, it's a haircut and
Yeah.
like a t-shirt and a song. And it's like, okay, we did enough research for that, but we didn't go deep. And Yellow Jackets definitely has gone deep, and it just makes it such a joy to watch from that aspect.
Well, and what I found incredible is that somehow that '90s nostalgia stayed alive in the wilderness without anything to give you the '90s nostalgia. You had no culture. You just had these people. And so I think that that's just good writing. That's just good. Like, that's what it comes down to. Like, I'd love to take credit for any of that, but that's just fantastic, right? To be able to, like, create these characters that now are bringing their '90s life to the middle of nowhere on their own in a life or death situation. Yeah, I just took my hat off.
And it's good timing for the characters in the story because I mean, I could tell you, my recollection, and my wife is my age as well, but it's like we talked about this extensively. Like there was a really a strong wave of female empowerment happening at the time in media and culture. And I think Nat just like embodies that so much in how she's schooling Travis and like telling him basically to stop being such a shithead.
Oh, constantly, and it's throughout the whole season, and, you know, he's listening,
Yeah,
not all the time, but he's listen not all the time, and, you can tell that, like, when you know, he when he gets aggravated, he goes straight back to his default, and
yeah.
there's no question, but when he's not aggravated, you start to see those like, that playfulness between them, and you even start to see, like, hi him feeling scared when it comes to being around her, like, in episode 9, at the beginning of the party, you see a moment that you're like, "Oh, maybe they're gonna figure this out for just 1 second," and then, not so much.
I think he's listening, but he's fighting it. That's my theory. Like
Well,
he wants to go with what she's saying, but his own teenage male masculinity is just making him fight it.
Well, and the only reason he's listening, I think, is also because he's alone. Like,
Yeah.
it's
Right.
just him, right? And so it allows for us to explore an idea of like, okay, if these were the only people he was around, would he finally start to listen? Or, when you don't have the outside distractions of other guys, other people. Yeah.
Yeah, and you have to take into consideration somebody like Travis, who we know had a rough background. He was bullied. There's so many things that at this point, I would assume somebody like Travis also questions Nat's intention. Are you talking to me just because we're lost out here by ourselves? And as soon as we go back to the normal world, you're going to forget me? So I always think about that's why Travis has this wall towards
Oh,
Natalie.
well, I guess it was a big point to me when I was trying to play Travis. It was none of these people really talked to him before this.
Yeah.
And so that was something that was really hard to remember, like, there's gotta be a more reserved quality, like a really defense mechanism quality to him because these people never cared about a single thing he said, but now all of a sudden they're expecting him to act how they want him to act. And so there's a defense, there's an anger in that, right? Like, and that was something I really wanted to explore throughout the season, which his anger we definitely explore.
No one's made that comparison. There is sort of a quality like the movie The Breakfast Club, because even with teammates, you don't get the sense that all of these girls hung out together
No.
outside of team functions.
Oh no, 1000%. So you can see their little cliques on the first episode when they're at their parties. Like none of them are hanging out together until Jackie kind of like gathers them to get them to get their stuff together. That's when she gets them together. But when they're out at that rave party in the woods, uh, the irony. None of them are hanging out together in the same group.
Yeah, no, and I think that, that it's very normal, like, in a team, right? Like, in any team, in any situation, like, that's what's extraordinary about the situation. That's what creates the conflict. Because I see a lot of people talk about, like, why is this conflict, like, these teenage conflicts coming up so much? And it's like, well, if you put people who wouldn't necessarily spend time together, spending time together, no matter what situation they're in, their differences are going to clash, no matter what. The differences in who they are, they're gonna start coming at you.
That's what makes great reality TV nowadays. That's why you
For
have
sure.
shows like The Real World or Big Brother because you
Oh,
put
yeah.
people that would never get together in one room and see what happens.
Yep.
Or in the woods. So I want to get into Doomcoming specifically, but I do have to ask. Travis did not like his father. Without spoiling anything, is there a defined backstory for this that we might learn about?
So this was really important to me. And I've spoken about this a couple of times now, in previous interviews as well, where when I was getting ready for the role, I sat down with Bart, Ashley, Drew, Jonathan, Jamie. Like we all talked and we went, okay, what do you they were so open, first of all, and they turned to me and they're just like, what do you want to know? Like what do you want to know? Because they kind of knew where a lot of the story was headed. And I remember turning to them and just saying, I don't need to know what's gonna happen to him in the future. What I do need to know, or would like to know, is there anything we're gonna find out about his past that's gonna inform how he is now and in the future? Because that's important because he's carrying that with him already. And so, the one thing we talked about was his relationship with his dad. And, I remember when we shot that little scene for the pilot, Jamie and I got together right before blocking, and Jamie's like, "Okay, we got 22 seconds to do a whole lot of storytelling." We got
No
22,
pressure.
no pressure, but 22 seconds for us to understand a lot so that people can see that. And so the big things that we wanted to be clear on was he didn't wanna go on the trip. Him and his dad are not on good terms. Him and his mom are pretending for Javi.
Hmm.
There's that version of, like, there's clearly conflict, whether it was a fight, we never defined how far that conflict went, but there was clearly a moment where that kiss wasn't really a kiss with them,
Mhm.
like, it was there as, like, a performance for hobby, and then Travis sees that it's a performance and goes, like, "Come on, nice pretending." And so I believe that the conflict there, was left up to, me to decide in that past is like how far that conflict between his parents was and how his conflict between him and his dad was. But we know that Travis never ever really felt cared for when it came from him and his dad. They didn't see eye to eye. He wasn't the soccer guy that his dad wanted. He wasn't that kid, and it's obvious that he wasn't. So, yeah, we didn't get too much into the definition of it, but it was enough to be able to draw on.
And we do know that his dad missed the big practice before nationals because of an undisclosed family thing.
Yeah, yeah, exactly.
He was with
Undisclosed.
his secret family.
The secret, yeah, the one on the
Yeah,
picture.
the
Yes,
one in the
the one for
photo.
the picture.
And Travis found out about this, and that's why he's very upset with his dad.
Very upset, yeah. The theories just go on forever, by the way. It's like, you can
Oh,
lose yourself in Reddit. Like, I've lost my human self. Okay.
we made a whole podcast out of theories, okay?
Yeah, I love it.
That's what we love to do. We go on 2 hours a week just theorizing
I
about this
love
show.
it. I
It's
love it.
addictive.
It's so easy. It's so easy with this show. And then the absurd starts to become plausible, and the plausible starts to become absurd. And
Oh,
so let's talk about Doomcoming. In this episode, I mean, Travis almost has the biggest, the low key, most important arc in the episode. If you look at what happens between him and Natalie, and he goes from longing for her to almost saying something, and then Jackie asks him to sneak off. They hook up. Travis then seems very disassociated and very out of it due to the mushrooms. He's then outright assaulted and then terrorized. How do you see his journey through this episode, and what was it like filming?
Oh, I just remember that, I can't remember who it was. It was one of our producers came up to me right before the script was released and said, "Oh, have fun with episode 9. This is gonna be a wild situation for you." And I went, "Okay, alright, let's go. Let's see what happens." And then the script came out, and I went, "Wow, he puts himself through so much
Mhm,
and then gets stuck in so much in one episode." And so when we went through it, it was really important that, we made it clear that he does long for Natalie,
mhm,
that's where his heart is, but as we have seen in real life, not just in 1996, but in 2021, people don't always think with their hearts,
yeah,
and so it was clear that, it was easy to get entranced by Jackie in that situation, and, he found her attractive, and there was it was his time and less intimidating, and I believe that it was really important to justify why he felt more comfortable
mhm,
with Jackie than he did with Natalie at that time, and for me as an actor, I always thought to myself, well, 1, we don't know when he starts to feel the things from the stew. Number 1, we don't know when that starts to happen. It's never clear because he never seems so disassociated. Even through that conversation, I think if you listen with him and Jackie, he doesn't really say anything. He just
yeah,
stands there and listens and says, "I'm sorry." And that's it in the whole thing. So we don't know when it's really starting to kick in. We don't know if it's before or after. And I think leaving that open-ended is really important because that's not a justification for why he did that anyways. In the reality, there was a part of him that wanted to from a physical standpoint, and then important thing for me was he didn't feel intimidated because it was also her first time,
mm,
and I think that there's something there, right, to be thought of. Is like you know, with Natalie, he was intimidated because not only does he love her, obviously, but he's scared he's gonna mess up and he's gonna look stupid. I think there's no question that that had a huge part in why he was feeling the way he did right beforehand. Like, I think the most cringeworthy thing I ever heard him say was, "You don't have to talk like that," in
yeah,
episode 6, right after, and it was like, "Whoa," like, to think that that's where his head was. Like, don't help me, don't help me." Like, there was, in episode 9, you can see that there's this moment where he can just let go.
yeah,
He just and, they kiss, they look at each other, they know they're making a mistake, but they do it anyways. I think we see that time and time again. Now, when the shrooms really kick in afterwards, I it was it was interesting to play with this idea of consent,
yeah,
and that's where my head went. Where did consent, and it was a gray area, obviously, that scene in the cabin, it's a gray area where consent started and where consent stopped. And I think that was really important because if you sympathize with Travis throughout that scene at any point in terms of consent, I think it should force you to have to think about, wait, but he never said no. He
yeah,
never said stop until right at the end where he runs out. So where did you start to sympathize with him? And that was really important to keep that really gray. And Daisy, our director, really allowed for us to choreograph that sequence, of kiss, kiss, grab, chair, rip off, and kinda go like, "Okay, he's liking this." We even played with this idea that, um, when he's looking up around to the people, he's feeling good, and once he finally turns forward and sees Lottie and there's a change in him, that all of a sudden he starts to freak out, and that's when
yeah,
he starts to see everyone in a different sense, and so, um yeah, consent was the biggest thing for me, is where did he not want it anymore? Where did it become something that he wasn't okay with anymore? And, I think it's such a gray area, and I think the hardest part to play after, and it just hurt me a little bit,
yeah,
actually, as a human, was when Natalie does save him at the end, and
Right.
he
yeah,
just turns to her and says, "I'm fine," and walks away. And it's like, that's to me, if anyone pays attention, that's the toxic masculinity is right there. That's what it is. It's that moment right there where the worst thing happens to you, and you still have to pretend that you're better than everyone else. And so
yeah.
that was a tough journey, but it was fun.
It reminded me, we were talking about on the recap podcast with Bram Stoker's Dracula. I think there's a very similar scene with like three vampires, three female vampires and a man. And it was terrifying. Like that starts very weird and then goes very dark very
But
fast.
listening to your process, I have even more appreciation for this scene. I love this scene, but I love that you brought up the consent because that's where I felt it. As a viewer and as a super fan, I'm thinking, okay, Travis is feeling himself. He's high on the shrooms. He has all these babes around him. But then you feel when he starts going wrong and you're like, wait a minute, this is no longer fun and nobody's slowing down. I love that that was your train of thought because it really came through on the screen. Because at first I was like, okay, go Travis, get some. And then all of a sudden I'm like, wait, back off, leave him alone. And you can see exactly when he starts going wrong.
Yeah, and I think personally, I really hope that it creates those debates and that
Mhm.
conversation, because that's a conversation we should be having, is where does that start and end in any situation? And you know, how we should sympathize with people in that sense. And yeah, it was a scary, fun situation doing those scenes because it was fun to explore Travis in a much more vulnerable state than he was
Yeah.
pretty
Right.
much in the rest of the in most episodes. Like he covers up his emotion a lot more. It's a lot harder when it's fear. And I think that was a big thing for me, is when I took into consideration fear, you can't stop how you feel when you're in that much fear. And so it was that idea of like, this is your moment that you don't have time to make a wall. You just don't, there's no time to. You gotta freak out, and you gotta get the heck out of that cabin as quickly as you possibly can.
I didn't even think about this till now, but prior to that, when he's dancing with Jackie, okay, so here's the guy that feels like an outcast, right? That feels like he was bullied by one classmate in particular. He's had a hard go of it. And then it makes sense why he's kind of feeling himself, because there you are, like going toe to toe, flirting and holding her own with the most popular girl in school from the way she's been presented. And Travis is seen as desirable. But it is interesting that, like, she almost creates, like, she uses like these Jedi, like, almost mind trick tactics of creating a nihilistic situation to be like, nothing, everything is meaningless. Let's just do this. I'm not asking again. And Travis is like, okay, that makes sense.
Well, and that was something that, you know, Ella and I talked about a couple times, in this idea of like, you know, people sometimes underestimate that manipulation isn't on purpose sometimes.
Yeah.
Jackie is just going through what she's going through. She's not that, I think we talked about this. There is not like a version of her where I think that it's evil attempt
Yeah.
to try and get him to do something. Never. And she agreed in many ways when we talked about that scene. But that doesn't mean that the opposite side of that, that feels like manipulation to Travis, isn't also happening all at the same time. So there's this push and pull of like, neither one of them's right in this situation. Neither one of them's necessarily making the right decision, but that doesn't mean that they don't both feel like they're pushed into a corner in a certain situation that puts them there.
I have to ask, given the reveal of I don't know, we could call him cabin guy, but the hunter, as he's credited in the episode, with Travis's disassociation is at the end of, and confusion. Where are we? Do you think there is a logical jump? And I'm completely spitballing with this, that there might have been some possession going on or something otherworldly where Travis was gone, whether it was on that in between plane or was just not entirely in control of himself.
I think that's a beautiful writing kind of moment, in the sense of throughout the entire episode 9, if anyone looks at it and listens to each word that everyone says while they're kind of
Yeah.
in their trip, there is that subtle kind of like, where are we? What's
Yeah.
happening? Are we here actually now? Everyone's kind of in that world where it's like, it feels like maybe there is something more than just these shrooms at hand always. And I think that that's
Right.
kind of the whole point of the show, is I think from episode 1 onwards, right from when you have those like POV shots,
Yeah.
Yeah.
that's that stuff always tripped me out. And then at one point, the POV shot kinda is, like, misty, actually, at one point, like, in the, you know, when
Yeah.
she's watching that one part, and you're like, "Oh, what's going on?" And I believe that there's this idea of this push and pull between, uh, w is the supernatural there with Lottie? Is it not? And I believe that that's something that continues to be explored as thematically in this show, which I really love because at the end of the day, there is also a logical reasoning for everything that happens as well. So because there's a rational reason
Exactly.
and a non-rational reason that anything could be happening, it's hard to know from who's driving that, the rational or the not.
I
Yeah.
think that is the biggest debate that we experience weekly on our podcast that we can never really find an answer to. Every week we ask, do you think there's something supernatural going on? And we go back and forth for the longest time, and there's always a logical explanation. But there's always that I think there is something else there. And I love that about this show.
I love the show takes it head on with Thais and Van. I
Yeah.
love the show takes that debate head on in
Mhm.
its script, being like, "There this is logical, this isn't real," and someone else being like, "Well, maybe there is." And so that back and forth, I love that the show isn't hiding from that. They're not hiding from the viewers in the sense of like, "Oh, well, we're never gonna show you that it's a debate." No, no, it's a clear debate, not just within us as viewers, but it's a debate within the people that are experiencing it in that moment.
Since you brought up Thaisa, we always ask everybody. I'm not gonna ask you the 1996 because you played a character in that time frame. Who is your favorite modern day character?
Okay. Yeah, for the whole for the whole series, I would have said honestly, it's so hard to choose because I could just give you, like, 20,000 good things about
Oh,
each of
I
them.
know. I
I
know.
was like, like, for the first bit actually, it changed as we went on. For the first bit, it was the interesting side of Melanie's character, Shauna, and it was just
Yeah.
this depth of Melanie plays with the role is incredible. So for the first bit, it really was drawing me in throughout those first few episodes always. Uh, but then the pain that Natalie Juliette Lewis is going through just was aching at me by the time we got to episode 4, and so that would that kind of is where it became, like, my favorite at that point. And then and then honestly, like, then I went to Christina because Misty was just, like, the point like, come on, the cocaine scene, like, it doesn't get
Yeah.
any better than that.
One of my favorite scenes of the
Like, I
entire
can't, I
season.
can't. And then, honestly, the Taissa now at the end,
Oh, so
this
good.
understanding that there is so much more complexity in this role than you could have ever imagined. I'm so excited. I know it's going to be probably my favorite character in 2021.
Yeah.
But the standout performance that we can never, ever not talk about in any situation, I will bring up this performer in every situation, is Jeff.
Yeah.
Jeff
'Cause
is the man. Thank you.
it's I episode 9, Jeff is, yes, the funniest character by a mile in that episode, in my opinion. Like, there's just something hilarious in every way that he reacted to it. But Warren, the depth, and I think people miss this part quite a bit. The depth in his acceptance of
Yeah.
Shauna and to just stand there and take it and be there for her, it's yeah, it was unbelievable. Like, I just that, it and Warren did it with such, I don't know, sensitivity. Like, it was like you felt for him the whole way through. You were like, "This guy really, really, really wants to make this work." Like, and there was yeah, it was beautiful. Like, so that's a standout performance to me. Warren in episode 9, standout.
He is ride
That's
or
an
die.
amazing answer. That's an amazing answer because in every one of my show notes, I write, I'm going to marry Jeff. I have loved his performance. He's been such a ride or die. And at
Yeah.
that moment, he put his selfless love. He put whatever he was feeling aside for Shauna. And that's exactly what unconditional love.
Yeah, and it takes something, with such a female-driven show and and we're talking, like, some of the most beautiful performances I've seen in characters on TV with some of these people to have also you still sympathize so well with this male character as well on top of that. It's kind of it's a beautiful beautiful marrying of these 2 ideas that, like, this one character can come and be this supplementary beautiful role for Shauna and
Yeah.
be her rock while she is allowed to be the complex human that she is.
I want to talk a little bit about your on-screen relationship with your character's brother Javi, and where we leave Travis and Nat. I didn't notice this till the second viewing. the end of the episode, Travis and Nat are in the cabin when Jackie is found at the end. So they did come back to the cabin that night. I believe from another interview that is out there that there was a deleted Javi scene, but I have no clue what that entailed.
There are 2 scenes that I won't really say what they were,
I
but
understand.
there are 2 scenes technically that were in the original script that aren't in the final
Got it.
edit. The Javi one actually wasn't shot, if I'm not mistaken, but it was in an original script. And then there was one with Travis. There's one more that I was technically in that would have given you a little explanation that's out. Now, the reason that I won't give away the scene is I don't know if that has actually storyline changed.
Yeah.
And so the storyline of that might have changed that we're gonna reveal that in season 2, but I'm not actually sure that I haven't had the chance to talk to Ashley and Bart about that yet. So I won't reveal it, but, definitely you do see them at the cabin, um, by the time that we find Jackie, right? So
Yeah.
they are there.
Given the way things are going, I will not be surprised if they're setting up camp in the airplane in season two, given the potential divisions and things that were hinted at.
Yeah, and I think the complexity in as we start to divide in our
Yeah.
human nature and who we choose to be and what kind of people we choose to be, I think it's gonna really shine a light on, at the core, um, how far people are willing to go. And I'm really interested to see Travis and Natalie because, even though they're seen as outcasts in many sense, like whether it's in 1996 when they're back home or out in the wilderness as they kind of have been, there's a part of them that feels like they're not part of the group in
Yeah.
many ways. Um, and they're kind of seen as outcasts in a negative way, but I believe that it's going to be interesting to see where does everyone's morals stand when push comes to shove as to what people are willing to do. And I'm really interested to see how that turns out.
Aside from the finale, I feel like we didn't see a lot of Travis and Javi time after the ring story. Like, were there any deleted scenes or more moments with you as brothers in the wilderness?
No, and I think that's just a tell of, like, how quickly,
Yeah.
how many characters we
Mhm.
have that we gotta kinda stay with this story. But what we can say, I believe, is that you can see that their relationship between 4 and 9 has settled down and
Yeah.
has figured itself out because he's there and he's helping out Javi, getting ready for Doomcoming. And he's part of Javi's life clearly, and Javi's not pushing against him when we get to 9. He's allowing him to be part of his life. So I think that definitely from the ring onwards, I don't think there was like I don't know how much conflict there would have been, but I definitely can see that they have kept a relationship of sorts. Though, I believe that most of their conflict at the beginning, um, a lot of it came from Travis's, you know, he didn't wanna deal with the situation he was in.
Yeah.
Never mind have to take care of his brother.
Yeah.
And so, there's that push and pull. He was dealing with his mixed emotions over his dad's death. And so it was a lot of taking it out on his brother that I think, we've seen far too much in families. But you can definitely see that he loves his brother. Like, there's no question, right? You don't go to the lengths of digging up your dad's body and not telling your brother that you went just to get a ring for him because you don't love him. You do.
Yeah. No, I mean, definitely, and I would love to see more of that relationship. Although after episode 9, in my head canon, after Shauna did that Bray Wyatt style growl of run, I like to think Javi ran all the way to Toronto, went into hiding, got a foster family, and then you'll appreciate this. We pan to the next day where he's being enrolled in Degrassi Community School, and it's like, oh shit, this kid can't catch a break. He's everywhere he goes.
Yeah, that's too good. Oh, man, Degrassi.
I personally think the bear ate Javi. Sorry, Kevin. That's what I
I
think.
know people, but I've seen that theory that the bear ate Javi, Javi is the bear. Like, they couldn't see him. I love the theory someone said that, they were all actually, like, in a trance, and it was Javi, and that they killed, not the bear.
Oh my god.
Good
Well,
lord.
technically speaking, they were seeing Travis as an
Oh,
animal, so
dear,
I can
yeah, definitely.
actually oh my god. Oh wow. I like that. Actually, I didn't think about that. Now, with this show having these supernatural, elements and the signs and things are meant to be, you have a connection to the name Javi because you play a character named Javi on your other show. So when you were reading the script, did you feel like it was meant to be? Did you feel a little bit of a overpower telling you needed to take this role?
Oh, the power telling me I needed to take this role was just the role itself. I was like,
Yeah,
I need it. I need it, period. But, the hobby thing, we have an ongoing joke, with between Luch and I that Javi actually then grew up and became Javi on Lock and Key. And so,
right.
really, Javi on Lock and Key is just Javi grown up a couple of years later.
So definitely not Adam. He just
Not
switched
Adam.
to a different show.
No, he became yeah, he just went to a different universe. This is the age of Marvel, like, this is the multiverse, so
Anything is possible. I mean, Glenn has him over in Degrassi. I
I
have him
think it makes
inside a
sense.
bear, and you have him in Lock and Key. So there's so many theories for Javi. It's
I
mind
love
blowing,
it.
actually.
And I'd
I love
forgotten you were on like 4 episodes of Degrassi.
Yeah, yeah, long, long time ago. Who? When I was actually that age.
Wow,
Back when I was actually that age.
that's
No.
awesome though, man. I know it's being speculated about, but we have no clue when season 2 starts shooting right now, right?
Yeah, it's definitely been speculated about. That's all
Yeah,
that's all I can
I
say.
know. I'm
It's
sure
been
Showtime wants
speculated.
it yesterday, you know?
Yeah, yeah, well, we will say this
Yeah.
actually, there is, Gary from Showtime came out with this article saying that,
Mhm.
he would like it to be on a yearly type run, so he'd like to, kinda set the same timeline as this past year. So if that's anything, that's the most confirmation I can kinda give you guys is Gary would like it to be at the same time this year.
Uh, and, Issa, did you have anything else? I just have a few more things before we wrap up.
Yes, I want to ask Kevin, if
Yeah,
you were stranded in the woods all alone, would you rather have Laura Lee's faith or Lottie's visions?
that's a good question.
Right?
Um, I think I think Laura Lee's faith in many ways. The reason being is just the visions can get confusing and can
Mm,
get scary, and I think it can take you to places that you then are not sure as you're making the right choices, and you can make some really terrible choices, whereas I believe faith kinda reminds me of something that I kind of try and live my life by in the sense of I don't believe well, it's not that I don't believe in destiny, but what I always say is, if destiny does exist, it doesn't need us acknowledging it for it to work. So, believing in your choices is really important. So if you have faith in the situation and you believe in the choices you're making, then you never look back and question the choices that you've made because you've done everything you can to make the best choice you can in that moment. So that's probably why I would choose faith because it kind of aligns closer to how I try and deal with myself on a day-to-day basis, which is, you know, destiny if it's there, I don't want it to make me lazy. I want I wanna do whatever I think is right, and if destiny exists, it'll work. It'll happen still.
Yeah.
Before we wrap, any other projects you have coming up or that you're working on during the hiatus?
Nothing I can quite chat about yet, but,
Oh,
yeah, but it's I'm I'm excited for the new year, see where things lead, and yeah, this has been such a whirlwind, I'm just trying to take it one day at a time.
that's awesome, dude. Well, Kevin, thank you so much for hanging with us today and giving us some more insights into Travis and Yellowjackets. This has been great.
Thank you guys so much for having me, you guys are awesome.